Our next speaker might be a familiar face to some of you. You might have seen this guy on social media if you've broken your phone or read about a company called iCracked. AJ Forsythe is the founder and CEO of iCracked, the world's largest on-demand repair and trade-in service in the United States and abroad. After breaking one too many iPhones, AJ founded iCracked in 2010 from his dorm room at Cal Poly State University. Anybody? Anybody? San Luis Obispo. So after graduating from Y Combinator in 2012, the company has grown incredibly fast, and today powers a force of more than 3,000 certified iTechs across the planet Earth. AJ, come on up here, brother.
What's going on, guys? It is a pleasure to be here, but before I tell you about what we're building, I need everyone to stand up and look at someone you don't know or you're unfamiliar with and give them a huge hug, because this is going to be a really good presentation. All right, this is probably more interesting than what I'm going to talk about, so if we can, I'll try to make this somewhat quick, because I know everyone's hungry in here. I do need a hug. Hold on one second. All right, awesome. So I'm excited to tell you guys about what we're building. In short, we have, John said 3,000. We now have 5,000 people in the company right now, and it's a on-demand iPhone and Samsung repair company. So raise your hand if you've ever broken your smartphone before. So it's a, that's awesome. So it's a pretty big company, or a pretty big market, I would say. But one of the things that's unique about us is we actually started in my living room and then kept moving house to house, getting larger houses. And I thought about how can we scale this company where we never would get an office. We would just get like a compound that people could eat, sleep, and breathe all under one roof. So I have some pictures of the early days if my clicker was working. And we'll get to the pictures here in a second. But the thing about our company is it's not about iPhone repair or trade-in or insurance. It's actually about how can we build a global technical workforce where anywhere on Earth you can press a button and we'll send someone to solve your high-end technology needs, whether it be repairing something or installing your Nest thermostat, security system, sound system, smart locks, smart doorbell. And so we like to think ourselves as the Geek Squad as if it should have been built in 2016, where we open up our platform to brands and you press a button and people will show up and solve your needs. But we are not there yet, and we're going to go back to where we were about 6 years ago. So this is a picture of our first office, which was my kitchen table that I took over from my roommates. And I started this in college, hanging flyers around campus. I ended up breaking my phone one too many times. My friends were in the same camp as me, and so I made neon flyers, and I'd go around and give them to my friends before they go to class. They would go hang them in the classrooms, and I'd get phone calls, and I'd meet people in the dorms to start doing repairs. And my co-founder, Anthony, I believe he's here somewhere. He's probably trying to get a drink somewhere. But my co-founder used to, when he started fixing phones with us at Santa Barbara campus, I just sent him these flyers, sent him some tools, and then he started repairing devices, and it became like one of the coolest college jobs where individuals can make upwards of $100,000 a year repairing these devices, and then we connect customers with them in real time. So this was where we were right before I graduated. And then once I graduated, we decided to move into a house where we had, I think, 5 of us working full-time in the company. This is a living room we moved into. And just as a side note, our landlord, like a couple weeks after we moved in, was like, hey, I want to talk to you. I think you're running a business out of this house. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. She's like, the postmaster says he's picking up a ton of packages. And I was like, shit. So we started driving the packages to the post office instead of leaving them outside. But I ended up meeting with my landlord. It was like a really awkward meeting because I was like, no, we're not doing business out of the house. So unless they're growing pot, don't get mad at your tenants if they're running businesses, because it could, you don't even have to get mad if they're growing pot. All right, we are moving on. Cool. All right, so this is all of the inventory we had. So how the model works is we supply all the hardware for our technicians, and then we connect them with customers. They show up and do repairs, and then you pay the iTech. And the picture on the left is we took over my co-founder's sister's bedroom to make these kits, to like our first kits that we'd send iTechs. And we put $30,000 to $50,000 on our credit cards to try. We hadn't raised any funding at the time. And we're like, we actually probably naively were like, oh, it's free money. We'll just put it on our credit cards. And so we made these tackle box size kits, and then we'd bring on iTechs. We put up career postings, and people would say, hey, I want to start fixing phones with us, and we'd send them one of these tackle boxes. And then the screen, or the picture on the left, is all of our inventory that we had at the time could fit into those two, that black box right there. And we thought that this was like the weirdest business we'd ever been in. And this is a picture of like the new kits and what we're doing now out of our fulfillment center. And so the pictures are about, I'd say about 3 years apart, where each month we're bringing on about 300 to 400 new individuals into our company, and we can provide this like crazy meaningful source of income and solve customers' needs. This is our going from a living room to operating. Now I think we have 6 offices. Like, it's been absolutely crazy. Very high highs, very low lows. So it's definitely not been easy. And right now we're in about 11 countries. We're going to be launching probably 3 more countries this year. We launched the EU in 2014. We have a partnership in Japan where, which I'm really excited about, because we're going to be, we're working with a Japanese conglomerate that is like, hey, we want to open up hundreds of iCracked stores around Japan, and I've never been to Japan, so we're like, all right, we'll try to do this. And now we have iCracked stores opening up in Japan, which has been definitely wild. But the future of company is all about like new verticals. So it's not about iPhone repair. I think the important thing is where you necessarily like start your business is not where it ends up. And it's always been about the network and excellent customer service and pressing a button and having your needs solved. It's not about what the repair we're actually doing. So one of the things that when we were starting early on, and we were talking to potential customers or to potential investors, we didn't have this like exponential growth early on where it was very gradual and just month over month or quarter over quarter growth. It wasn't a sexy business at all. It was iPhone repair when it started. And the thing that over the last 5 years that we keep reminding ourselves is that like no one's ever gone out of business because they're growing too slow. You generally overinvest and over-leverage yourself, and that's when trouble happens. It's not if you're taking your time and being diligent. And then also is one of the things that I personally have struggled with our organization is I love to say yes to like new projects, new products, new software we're building, when it's actually about what can you say no to grow the business. And so one of the things we're driving down is a lot about focus on saying no to things that may seem good but may not fit the long-term vision. And then we also highlight quite a bit this concept of that we took from Jim Collins' book, is shoot bullets and then cannonballs, in that if you have tests or products that you want to launch, don't put a ton of resources behind them hoping that that's the future. Do a lot of A/B testing and really study what you're going to do before you put all your resources or capital behind whether it be a marketing plan, a new product line, or a new complex. And I think that one of the reasons that I'm excited to come talk to you guys is when we started, it went from a living room to then renting a 5-bedroom house. And we kept hiring our friends or people we'd worked with prior, and they'd moved to California and they didn't have housing specifically on the peninsula, so we would lease another house, and then we'd be like, yeah, we'd have a room for you if you come and live with us, and then eat, sleep, and breathe the company with us. And it got to a point where we ended up having 11 houses with, I think, 60 people living there. And we had to, I guess, grow up and move into an office. But just as a side note, drive down renters insurance policies. We had someone flood a 3-story condo of ours because the shower rod hit the fire sprinkler. So tell everyone to get insurance policies. But I'm happy to be here, and I would love to answer Q&A with John on kind of the business and both where we're heading and how I think it ties in. But I love being here. This is awesome. This is the coolest conference.
Round of applause for AJ. Have a seat, brother.
Thank you, man.
So, that's not 93% of the U.S. population, is it?
Yeah, it definitely is.
It's like a lot of Texas there. Dude, it's just like character building on AJ. We went to a Warriors game earlier this year. He doesn't know anything about basketball. He can't name like even Steph Curry. But we've got our tickets and we're walking up to the gate, and he sees this metal detector, and he's like, "Uh-oh." And I'm like, "What?" he's like, "Oh, I forgot. I've got my Bowie knife in my boot." This guy's wearing boots, takes out this knife that's like 10 inches long. I'm like, "What are you doing? We're going to a Warriors game." So we had to walk out, and we had to like hide his Bowie knife in the parking lot under a car. We got the knife back.
I actually have it in my boot right now. I'm just kidding. I do not have a knife on me.
Unbelievable. So I was just catching up with you backstage. You had an interesting weekend. You spent some time on the boat. So AJ's warehouse is in Redwood City, which is probably like in traffic, not a fun drive. Hour and a half to get to the city, but if you take a boat, it takes about how long?
It's about 49 minutes if the tides are in your favor.
So how big's your boat?
Okay, so I actually haven't told this story publicly. My company doesn't even know it, but I have like this 12-foot little speedboat that I bought on Craigslist. And you can, like, our fulfillment center, it's about 27 miles south of here, but it has a public dock in front of it, so you can take a boat from our fulfillment center up to San Francisco. And oh my gosh, I'm going to tell the story. All right, so it's a two-person.
This is like boat. 3 days ago.
This is on Saturday. So it's a 2-person boat. My good friends decided to come out with us, so we ended up putting 4 people on a 2-person boat, which on the insurance policy side of things, I should have had insurance on this damn boat, but I didn't. And it was taking on water under the Bay Bridge. And I was like, oh shit, my feet are wet, and there's 4 people in a 2-person boat. We should head in. And so I gunned the 30 horsepower motor, which is not a very large motor. And before we get to the shore, the freaking boat sinks and we swim in. And so we swim in. At that time, there'd been like 200 people on the shore taking pictures and videos. And then I'm all wet, and I run to the fire department. Fire department's like, sorry, we can't really help you. They call the Coast Guard. And then I spent 4 hours with the Coast Guard pulling my damn boat up from the bottom of the bay.
But you're here today, just to make it to
I'm here today. Yeah, I was actually taking the boat to make it to this conference. So you guys are all welcome. Do not tell my parents and/or executive team that story.
How many employees are you now?
We're about 100.
100 and then 3,000 iTechs?
5,000.
5,000 now.
Yep.
So just to kind of touch on humble beginnings, I think the crowd would be really interested to hear about what was like your household like growing up? Like, what are your parents like? I met your parents. They're amazing people.
They're amazing.
But how did this AJ Forsythe product like emerge from that like humble household?
No, it was definitely an accident. I'm the youngest, so I think I definitely was an accident. Parents are great.
Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Detroit. I've lived in 8 states growing up. So I think actually what happened is we'd make good friends growing up, like best friends, and then 2 years later we'd move. And so I got accustomed to meeting and remaking friendships, which it was shitty at the time, but gave me a fairly good U.S. view, and then when I went abroad, world view. But yeah, I couldn't be happier with with growing up and meeting a bunch of people. So my brother and I, we were both wrestlers in high school, and then we were recruited to wrestle at Cal Poly. And so he was 3 years older than me. I went there as well. We ended up wrestling for a couple of years and got distracted by wine because it was in San Luis Obispo in the Paso Robles area. It's awesome for wine. And so there's just a Navy, I don't think you know this story. So there's a Navy SEAL that my brother worked with at a winery where he's like, hey, I want to make my own wine, but I don't want to build the vineyard. And we're like, oh, we'll build the vineyard. You just have to pay for everything. And so we ended up starting a winery, I think my sophomore year in college. And it was really out of personal need because wine was really expensive. And if we made it, it was much cheaper. And then also we would sell it to kids in the dorms, which there's this whole theme of like what's legal going on with the winery.
What is legal?
But we ended up we made that legit, and then after that was running, we started a beekeeping operation, which I mean honey's very high margin, and you can make money like removing swarms. Farmers rent beehives, and then you can sell honey. So it's actually a very lucrative operation.
I've heard about this beekeeping business like 14 times. Like, what are some bee stats? Can you drop some bee stats on us? Do you know any stats?
I have 13 minutes to talk about bees if you really want to do this.
Just give us like a couple stats on bees.
Okay, so here's what most people don't know is, so most bees that you see are female, and there's one queen. But when you capture a swarm, which I have a Craigslist ad up right now that's like professional swarm removal, which I'll get a phone call and then I'll go capture a swarm, which is you like cut down branches, throw it in a 5-gallon bucket, and then you can like dump 10,000 bees into a new hive. But you generally don't know how old the queen is or how fertile she is. So I can't. Why are we talking about this? But you can find the queen in the hive, and then you pinch off her head, which is like shitty. But so you pinch off the queen's head and kind of rub her body on the hive, so the hive freaks out because the queen's dead, and so they'll take their larvae and they'll turn them upside down, start feeding them royal jelly to grow new queens. And you can like re-queen a hive, and then you can actually buy queens. They're about $20 to $30. You put them in a little matchbox, and all the other bees start smelling the queen for like 5 days. They get used to it. Then you open the matchbox, and if they don't kill the new queen, you just re-queen the hive, and then you can re-DNA the entire hive. So I have 12 more minutes to talk about this.
So we're going to pivot the conversation. So I would imagine that working with AJ is probably pretty fun. So can you talk to us about the core values of iCracked and when you're looking for new hires, how do you make sure that they're a culture fit?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we came up with core values in 2012. And I actually didn't really believe in them. I think they're probably the same core values that like most of our companies in the audience have. And so we're in the process of retooling it, so we're actually, if you ask people on our team what are your core values, they'd probably give you generic ones, but they wouldn't give you ones hyper specific to us. And in the next 3 months, I want ones that are hyper specific to us that may sound odd from the outside, but everyone would believe it on the internally. But when we're hiring people, I look for if I thoroughly enjoy being around them. Actually, I have a really interesting slide if we can go back up. I don't think you've seen this slide, but I'll show it at the end. But I thoroughly believe that like life is incredibly, incredibly short, and you should only surround yourself with people that you love being around. And we do the same thing at work, where if people are going to give us 2,000 to 3,000 hours of their lives a year, like you better be freaking awesome to be around. We have a no asshole policy. We have plenty of Coors Light for after 5. I think we hire people that are wicked smart and are looking to do the best work of their lives while hopefully working harder than they ever have been. And then if we win, we all win.
How many Coors Lights have you had in the last 2 hours?
I had.
Don't answer that.
Yeah. None.
It's incriminating.
So what you guys have learned today is how to requeen a hive, how to sink boats, and that it's socially acceptable in Silicon Valley to drink 2 Coors Lights on the way up.
What do you think about the next big thing for iCracked? Like, well, let's approach it this way. If you're going to ask somebody for advice on something, like who are people that you know and trust and turn to at this stage of your career?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. If you go back 5 years, the mentors that we had surrounded ourselves with are not the mentors that are still around with the company. And I think that one of the things that people don't mistake is that companies can outscale like coaches or mentors. And so I think it's important to note that like a year from now, the mentors we surround ourselves with may be different than the ones that we have now. We may not be friends a year from now. I don't.
It's a high probability.
You'll probably outscale me.
Well, you're going to sink on a boat, and I'll just be on shore taking pictures.
But I think So I look at that we have this window of opportunity, and most of the companies in this room have this window of opportunity to like execute and become like a great company or a weatherproof company. And I spend one of the things we just recently hired a COO, which I'm thrilled with because that's going to give me more time to focus on like the culture and the DNA of our company. And I've actually never set aside a day to just focus on what can I do to make our employees' lives easier, or iTech's lives easier. And like, what can we change in the culture to make it this like a better workplace, or that can leverage people to their maximum. And I'm really excited that I'm actually getting to focus now on what do I want this workplace to be like outside of what our business actually is. Like, what do I want it to feel? How do I want people to talk about us when they talk about to their friends? And I'm very excited that that I'm going to have the opportunity to do that, because I can hopefully build an amazing place where people love working.
So you're going to go back to the office. The CEO is going to do all the work now. How do you like approach that? What's the first thing you do? So, and maybe to put it in context, here's a lot of the people in this room are constantly acquiring communities, selling communities, or taking management responsibility over a community, and it's going to come from a different company with different values, and then all of a sudden it's an acquisition, and now it's part of your portfolio, and you do a little rebranding. You want that to embrace the vision of your organization, and so it's constantly happening, and it's probably happened to everybody in this room this year already. So like, when you are taking on a rebrand, like how do you approach it, and how can we maybe tie it to the folks in this room? So
we're also rebranding the company here probably in the next 60 days. I have a spectacular CMO starting on Monday.
Do you do any work, or does everybody else just do it?
No, so that's a deeper question than than it may appear. So when you're starting out, it's all about like how do you build a great company or a great product, and then as you're evolving, you're actually hiring people and shelling off responsibilities. So like the worst day I've ever had in our company is I'd probably been working like 16 or 18 hours. I was at our fulfillment center. We hadn't hired a janitor yet, and I was Amazoning all of the things to clean the fulfillment center. And it's 2 a.m. I think I was probably the only person there, and I'm opening up a toilet wafers. I don't know what they're called. You put them in urinal wafers.
Toilet cakes?
Toilet cakes. So I try to open this Amazon package, and it explodes all over me. And I was like, I need to hire a janitor. like this is insane. And so, but every new incremental hire, you shell off responsibilities. And it's not about building a great product anymore. Now it's moving to how do we build a great company that builds a great product. And so, I'm so freaking excited to be able to bring on this like crazy awesome senior leadership team and management below them, and then everyone else in the company, because I actually should be hiring people constantly that are better than I would be at their job. And so that's why I can afford to come here at 11 a.m. instead of being at the offices. And it's somewhat of a joke, but it's not. You just have to delegate and hire responsibly, and then my job is to build a great company that builds a great product right now.
So we heard about your worst day. Why don't we, can you tell us about your best day, and then we'll take some questions from the audience.
Best day. So best day would be in 2011 when Anthony, my co-founder, and I raised our first seed round. Is around $200,000, and I think that was the best day because that was the first time that someone actually like believed in us with their checkbook. You always hear like anecdotally like, oh, I support you, I believe in you, but when someone writes like a investment directly in you in an unproven idea, we were in my living room at the time, like hitting refresh on our Chase Bank page, and then we see like it go from $1,332 to like $200,000, $1,332. And then we went and bought iCracked.com from a cyber squatter that this fucker owned it, and he was and so
how much is iCracked.com?
So we had less than $5,000, and I oh my gosh, I made up a name that I was like from John Dickinson from the University of Maryland working on a class project. So I was like negotiating with the cyber squatter, and I'd already trademarked iCracked, and then as this like alias, I was like, hey, just FYI, someone's already trademarked this, so you better sell the domain, and I'll take the risk. And then we bought it for $4,000. And so, yeah, so that I hate buying domain names.
It's no fun. Questions from the audience? I'm going to bring it back real quick. Oh, wait, we've
questions?
got some. Tiff?
How many iPhones have you broken?
Oh, my God.
How many iPhones have you broken?
So I water damage them more than break them now, namely sinking boats. If you actually if you open up my iCloud, if you guys have done like Find My iPhone and it shows all your devices, I'm on like my 25 or 30th freaking device. But it's cool because I can press a button and have it fixed relatively easily, and I still fix it myself.
Wasn't there a story about you guys knocking phones out of people's hands in college or something?
So this is actually an awesome story. So no, I was not knocking phones out of my brother started this winery that I was fortunate enough to be a part of. And he calls me and he's like, hey, I'm making business cards. Can I put that I'm an iCracked exec? And I was like, yeah, it's just me, my co-founder. Like, you can be an executive in the company. So he makes business cards, and he knew how to fix phones because he'd have to fix his own. And if you remember, like, the iPhone 4 and 4S looked identical. Like, you couldn't tell a difference between them. And so he went out to the bars, and there was a really cute girl, and she was like texting on her phone, and he like slaps it out of her hand to like introduce himself, and it goes on the floor and breaks. And this was right when the iPhone 4S had come out, and she's like, what the hell? And he's like, oh, don't worry, I can fix it. And he ended up calling me, and he's like, AJ, like, this new screen won't fit on. And the girl's like, he's at her house fixing the phone. And I was like, what's the model number? He's like, A1529 or whatever. I'm like, dude, that's a brand new 4S, not an iPhone 4. And he had no idea how to fix it, nor did he have inventory. And so he had to go buy her a new phone the next day. So that was one customer acquisition strategy that probably wouldn't scale.
Questions?
I have a question. So eventually I'm thinking iPhones are going to do the no crack screens like Android.
Hopefully.
How do you feel about that?
Oh, well, I'm personally going to love it. So that day is probably 3 to 5 years away. We know it's not going to be in the next 3 generations. But one of the reasons that I'm excited for us to get into home automation, IoT, and smart home install, which, as a side note, everyone in this room should be able to, in the next 24 months, press a button and have one of our technicians show up and install smart locks, thermostats, doorbells, and like completely automate your home. That's going to be an awesome day. But back to the unbreakable phone screen, myself and my leadership team's job is to have diversified out of iPhones, iPhone repair by then. But I look at us, we have a 36-month window to do that, but we need to start doing the groundwork for it now.
Well, we've got the founders of Notion and LifeX and Eero here later today.
Oh, they're all awesome.
Maybe you'll be helping out installing those systems.
Huge kudos to the people you got here. They are so far amazing.
So thank you very much. While we have time, one more question. I want to come back to this, the kind of the embracing and building of the culture from the ground up. So you launched your brand in Japan. you had to go over there and like. So I want to relate it back to our audience here, though, because they are constantly kind of selling or acquiring properties, and then you do have to embrace that, pull it in under your roof, and like any tips for how to do that? Because you're about to go through this over the next 60 days. It sounds like how do you approach stuff like that, and how did you do it overseas, and how are you going to do it here?
So the bad advice is. When we were very small, both as a company and number of technicians, and we were pitching ourselves to media and news outlets, I somewhat felt disingenuous on what we were telling them, like what we're capable of. But I knew if everything worked out, we actually would be capable of it. And it was this mix of like fake it and before you make it, but you just have to, it's not. It is, you have to have this core belief that you're actually going to deliver on what you're promising. And if you can deliver it, then you get this leeway where you have to pretend to be almost something you're not. And then when either big deals hit or properties that you're acquiring or selling, it's a balance of like, what do you're not lying, but you're talking about the future version of yourself. And if you become that future version of yourself, then you looked like you were a visionary all along versus if you actually don't become that or you let your customers down, then you can come off as a fraud almost. So I do think it is a fine balance between faking it before you make it, but if that's actually what you're going to evolve into or become, I think it's a safe bet.
Well, AJ, thanks so much for sharing your vision with us, being part of the Spark family yet another year, and just honored to share the stage with you. So how about a round of applause for AJ, guys?
No, please don't stand up.